We're very happy to have Evan Gran with us this morning, and I guess that the first person who made contact him was Laura Mappin at one or more events last fall, and so she actually arranged the talk today. But anyway, we're all thrilled to have Evan with us this morning in the pouring rain, and he took public transit from Berkeley, so I think he deserves extra credit for having taken public transit from Berkeley to get here. So I'll just read quickly. His topic is going to be Humanism in Norway. Evan Gran has been working full-time for the Norwegian Humanist Association since 2005. He works mainly as a journalist for NHA'S magazine and has visited many humanist organizations and attended many humanist/atheist conferences around the world. He will discuss the Norwegian humanist movement, the Norwegian state church arrangement, and the recent changes that have been made, funding of the Norwegian faith and lifestance sector, examples of how the Christian majority exercise their power over the public sector, and secularization. Are people really believers? So please give a warm welcome to Evan Gran.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Like Brian said, I'm working full-time as a journalist for the Norwegian Humanist Association. The reason I'm here in the Bay Area now for this year is because my wife is a researcher at the University at Berkeley. So I'm the spouse and following her, and while I'm here I write articles and send over, and you know, and I'm happy to be invited to speak to you, because I think it's important to, you know, to have connections in the humanist movement from one country to the other. I'm not going to go through what I'm going to speak, because Brian mentioned some of the things. I'm not sure if I will go too much into every detail, because I have only 1 hour, but we'll see how we will manage. In the beginning, I'll go through the basics. You know, the Norwegian Humanist Association is the world's largest humanist association, especially when it comes to the percentage of the population in the country, but I think actually also when in absolute numbers. It's a very, very large humanist association compared to other humanist associations in the world. Which sadly may tell us that the Humanist Association internationally is not very big, you know, compared to the population. But at least in Norway, we have 83,000 members, and that is actually, and we have a population of about 5 million. So that makes out 1.6% of the population actually are members of the organization. To get the scale, if you kind of compare it to the Bay Area, where you have like between 7 and 8 million people, the American Humanist Association would have had 123,000 members just in the Bay Area, if you had the same scale. And in the US, the AHA would have had 5.3 million members, you know, to compare the scales. The Norwegian Humanist Association are doing a lot of ceremonies. We have naming around 2,500 naming ceremonies for children every year. We have around 10,000 14-year-olds every year have humanist confirmations or coming of age ceremonies, which we have a tradition for in Norway. We have around 700 humanist weddings every year, and around 750 humanist funerals. So, and at the main office, the Humanist Association in all has around 81 employees, 47 in the main office and 34 in 34 together in the 19 counties that constitute Norway. We have one office in every county. Apart from the ceremonies, we are arranging lectures, meetings and debates, like this one, for instance, and, you know, going around speaking to people. The organization is voicing its opinion on political issues, you know, when it comes to secular principles, human rights, freedom of speech, euthanasia, circumcision, and things like that. So that relates to religion and life stance and in the society. We're also trying to be a social meeting point for our members, like you have here today. And we are also campaigning for issues that we feel are important. So every year nearly we have a campaign telling that where we try to tell the public something we think is important. I will show you because this is the main office in Oslo. We just moved there. So it's a central location in Oslo. I can just mention one campaign we had in 2011, which was a campaign called "Nobody Likes to Be Fooled." That argued for scientific views and rationality and how important science is, and of course were criticizing alternative medicine and kind of quackery. So now we have this vaccination subject, of course, that is very much talked about these days. So now we have this headline: "Vaccinate your kids. Listen to science and reason, and yes to healthy and living children. Vaccinate your kids." So that's kind of that part of the campaign, of course. And we also had actually James Randi visiting in 2011 so we had a tour he came over and had a tour of Norway, hugely popular campaign. And for instance, another thing we do, like just to mention a very recent thing, the blogger in Saudi Arabia that has been flogged because he wrote a blog and he was critical of Islam, and he was jailed and he's being flogged publicly every week now. And we have a demonstration with Amnesty International every week outside the Saudi Arabian embassy in Oslo. So that's an example of what we do. Norway is at its base a traditional monocultural society in which nearly just one ethnic group and one religion has been totally dominant for a very long time. Christianity, of course, has been the single dominant community building force, and that's a force that hasn't always been inclusive and tolerant. For example, in 1569, the Norwegian Danish king ruled that all foreigners who wanted to visit the country had to be Lutheran Christians. If not, they would be expelled. So you had to be Lutheran. And this strain of thought has sadly lingered up to our times. And that's it's a kind of thought that you will recognize also in the US today, I guess. The ideas from the French Revolution and the US Revolution, of course, about freedom, equality, and brotherhood didn't reach Norway in time to prevent the Norwegian Constitution of 1814 to ban Catholic monk orders, Jesuits, and Jews. So in the first version of the Norwegian Constitution, it says that Jews are not allowed to be in the country. So that says something about the heritage we have. And it has, of course, been amended later on. But and the Jews are now, and Jews and Catholics and Jesuits are now, of course, welcome. But that's the Constitution we still celebrate on the 17th of May with large processions in my country. And of course, this Constitution of 1814 also laid down the legal framework of Norway's Lutheran Evangelical State Church, that I will talk more about later on. But I will skip a part here because I don't have enough time, I think. Of course, this kind of very, very fundamentalist thought waned a bit, of course, during the 19th and the 20th century. And the free-thinking movement had made its impact in the late 19th century. And the mentality shifted. So whether to go along with tradition or not, of course, became a choice of the individual instead of the individual having to comply with whatever the community and the society around chose for the individual. Of course, this is connected to the general trend of individualization that we've had in the entire Western world. during the 19th and the 20th century. An important factor was the rise of modern science and a general emphasis on rationality that luckily prevailed, especially in Northern Europe and the US also, that made us become modern societies. Today, Norway is perhaps one of the most post-religious secular countries in the world. Maybe Sweden beat us, maybe. but it's a largely secular country when it comes to reality. You know, how people think and how they act. In national surveys, only around 40 to 45% will say they believe in an existence of some sort of God. Of course, it varies, you know, how you define it, the God in the survey, but you will get around like 40-45%. And if you narrow it down more closely to the basic tenets of the Christian religion, you will get much lower score for that. In the latest representative survey run by the Norwegian Humanist Association in 2012, 31% of the respondents answered that a humanist lifestance without a specific belief in the supernatural was the one closest to them. And that percentage was up 6% from 2008. So we're kind of gaining, the humanist life stance is really gaining ground, at least this survey showed signs of that. I have some PowerPoints showing this. You can see the Christian life stance went down from 59 to 50, and you see the human ethical or humanist life stance without a special belief in God got up to 31%, and that was a representative survey. So the secularization is of course happening. Most scientists agree that secularization is growing rapidly in Norway, as it has done also in a lot of other European countries, especially during the last like 10 years, something like that. In Norway, but that doesn't mean, around 10 to 15% actively declare themselves as atheists. So it doesn't mean that all the people who are de facto atheists, that if you kind of define it just by saying a person that doesn't believe in God, not all of them, of course, will say actively that I am an atheist, because that's a word that people kind of connect other things to. That, of course, you recognize this problem or this theme here in the US too, I guess. Because most people don't want to be seen as actively anti-religious, precisely because in a modern secular society, religion is purely a private matter that others shouldn't interfere with. So people don't want to be seen as a person that condemn other people's beliefs. Religion, especially the huge bulk of liberal Christianity, tend to be less and less based on traditional dogma and more inclined to adopt a modern liberal value system. And that is that you also see secularization within the Christian faith, that people tend to be less, they kind of say that it's up to everyone to decide, and it doesn't actually mean that. You can interpret it in a different way. So this kind of liberal Christianity is very, very common. And of course the state church that I will talk about has moved from an authoritarian traditional position to a position that is for a large part shared by the humanist movement and a big majority of the Norwegian population. We still have a way to go, though. We still haven't seen a Norwegian homosexual bishop, and homosexuals are still not allowed to be married in church, but they're coming along. In Sweden, they have both, and in Denmark, they even had a priest that said he didn't believe in God. So, and they also have a state church, and he was became a big row in Denmark, but he was allowed to continue his job as a priest, even though he publicly said that he didn't believe. So it's a kind of a interesting fact about Scandinavian religion. Now I'm going to talk that was a bit of a background, and now I will speak a bit about current affairs in Norway. Like Brian mentioned, the state church. We have a state church in Norway. But we've had a change in that lately. I have shown that only a minority of the population believe in the basic tenets of the Christian faith. A declining share the more specific you are. Nevertheless, around 75% of the population are still members in the Norwegian state church, 75%. That is actually also going quite rapidly down, because in 2005 they had 85% of the population, so it's going down. And the change is mainly due to generational shift, you know. So young people don't get in the same way that people die when they get old. So that's because of generational shift mainly. Despite the fact that Norway has become a largely secular state, we still have one big exception, of course, that is the state church. The foundation for the state church was laid down in the Constitution, as I mentioned. In the Constitution, we had until 2013, actually. It said that the evangelical Lutheran faith remains the official religion of the state. The explanation for this apparent contradiction between a non-believing population in a largely secular state and the state church is largely explained by the fact that most people regard the state church as not being kind of a religious entity, but a cultural institution. The church is a place where you baptize your children, get married, and get buried in the end. And that state church is largely looked upon as a kind of a governmental ceremonial provider. So people kind of react when you treat the state church as a religious community. People tend to react and say they shouldn't be treated that way because it's something different, you know. So that's how people look upon it. But of course, the Norwegian Humanist Association, we look upon the state church as a religious community and treat them like that. But that isn't completely in accordance with how a lot of people perceive the state church. Most state church members in Norway never go to church on other occasions. The day with the highest church attendance in Norway would be on Christmas Eve, and I will dare to say that a large part of that attendance comes from a wish to, you know, get into the Christmas mood or something, and because it's tradition, and that you should pay homage to tradition, and rather than being a sign of, you know, genuine worship. It's a problematic kind of to interpret, you know, what's happening inside of people's heads. But you know, when you speak to people and you hear what they say about it, they think it's it gives them a good feeling to go on church on Christmas Eve, and also that attendance is waning. We see on the statistics. So, however, we have had important changes in the state church system. In 2012, a long process of amending the Constitution when it comes to the state church finally came to a conclusion. The change was to the better. It was an improvement. It was a step in the right direction of to get closer to Norway becoming a true secular state. On May 12, 2012, the Norwegian National Assembly voted to remove the wording I mentioned about the evangelical Lutheran faith remains the official religion of the state. That's no longer in the Constitution, and they inserted the following phrase. After a lot of political rows and discussions, of course, between secularists and Christian people, you know, but the phrase that's in the Constitution now is the basis of our, this is my translation, of course, but, you know, the basis of our values remain our Christian and humanist inheritance. This constitution shall preserve democracy, rule of law, and human rights. So that is what it said now, and the most problematic part of that, of course, is the first part, where it says that the basis of our values, our values, it's kind of making, we are here and there are some other people there who don't share these values. So we are critical of that when it says like, the basis of our values remain, it has always been like that, the Christian, and then also humanist inheritance. And that has of course led to a big discussion on how to interpret humanism, because a lot of people will say that humanist shouldn't be interpreted as the life stance of the Norwegian Humanist Association. And that is also not something that we would like it to be interpreted as, because we don't want state humanism, So there have been a lot of discussions about that. I won't go into it, of course. But of course, this change, nevertheless, was a big step in the right direction. Despite the needless mentioning of this humanist and Christian and humanist inheritance. Some other amendments were also done to the Constitution. The obligation for Christian parents to give their children a Christian upbringing, which stood in the old Constitution, was removed. And also the forced membership in the state church for at least 50% of the cabinet ministers, government ministers, was removed, because earlier you couldn't have a government in Norway with less than 50% state church members. They had to be, because they were supposed to govern the church. So you couldn't have non-members governing the church. So that was the logic. But that has been removed. And when you strip away all the symbolic changes, the only real practical change that has become that we have had is that the church can now appoint their own bishops. Before, the church said, we want this person to be bishop, or we want this person to be bishop, and then the government decided who it was going to be. And at some occasions, actually, the government chose a bishop that the church didn't want. A more liberal one, it was at one occasion. But that has been removed now, and the church can decide for themselves. And that's a good thing, of course. They should be allowed to govern themselves without political interference. Apart from this, the king is still obliged to be a Lutheran Christian, and the state church is still the only religious community that is governed by a designated law. They have their own law, the Lutheran Christian, and all the other ones are treated differently. The NHA, the Norwegian Humanist Association, has of course always fought against the Norwegian state church arrangement. But we are still not pleased. But this is the situation right now. As an example of how the Christian dominance are still exerting power over the Norwegian public sector is one example is a row that we have every year just before Christmas, because there is an old tradition of arranging Christian services for school children arranged by the schools before Christmas. So all pupils go to church, and that is the tradition that you have. You end the semester in church. That has been an old tradition before Christmas. Yeah. And now, of course, you have the possibility to opt out. We have had that for a long time, that pupils don't have to participate if they don't want to. It's okay. The government says it's okay to arrange such a service, but it has to be non-discriminatory, and you need to have an equal alternative for the kids who don't attend church. So that's why how it is now, and that is not always practiced in every school. And every year we have kind of examples of this and that school who did that, and some pupils had to just sit and do homework while the other kids went to school, and one kid had to, they had a gathering, and then all the other kids went to church, and this one kid that didn't go to church, he had to clean up after the others. So we've had stories like that. So that is a theme that comes up every year. There are several propositions to fix this. You can sign up. Some schools actually have an equal sign up for. You can sign up for the church, and you can sign up for the alternative. That is one way to do it. That you shouldn't take it for granted that anyone goes anywhere. You should just, do you want to go to church, or do you want to go to the walk in the woods or whatever they offer? But the Norwegian Humanist Association has kind of proposed that the best thing would be to arrange the church going after school ends. Why does it have to be during school? Because that seems to be the most important thing for the people who propagate this, is that it has to happen through the school. The school has to be the one that arranged this church visit. But of course, if they just if the church ministers kind of arranged buses outside of the school, and the kids could go there and go to church after school ended, it wouldn't be a problem, because then you would choose, and it would be something you did on your spare time or when you were not at school. But that's been very, they cannot accept that. The school has to do it. Okay, so that was the state church. I will also talk about. I will try to talk about another subject that's been very, very important, and that is the compulsory religious teaching in schools, because the Norwegian school system is based. Kind of were built on religion. It was vicars or priests who went around teaching children, in the 19th century and before that. We had that system. So it kind of, the religion has traditionally been very entrenched in the school system. But it's been a heritage that's proven to be hard to get rid of. Up until 1974, public school had a designated subject on Christianity that was based on the state religion. You can compare this to the U.S. I don't know. Do you know the case of Vashti McCollum from the 40s? Yeah, she won in the Supreme Court in the U.S. because she didn't want her kid to be forced into a religious education in school, and that was in 1948. She won a court case in the U.S. Supreme Court about this. But in Norway, we had compulsory subjects like that, like the one that Vashti McCollum won or protested against. We had a subject like that until 1974, where you kind of just learned about Christianity, and this is our faith, and this is what it says in the Bible, and Jesus says this, and God says that, and the pupils were told this, and it was possible to opt out. But the pupils that were exempted did not get an alternative education. And of course, the aim of the subject was to give pupils a Christian and moral upbringing, like it says in one of the charter paragraphs of the school system. And this is also connected to the Constitution, where it's said until recently that parents who share the Christian faith are obliged to teach their children the same faith. So it's kind of the school system and the Constitution were connected when it came to that. The Norwegian Humanist Association has, of course, protested against this state-funded compulsory education ever since its inception. And in 1974 we won through. That is when the pupils got to choose Then in 1974 we got this alternative, of course. Then pupils got to choose between, on the one side, a purely religious Christian subject, and on the other side they could also choose intendedly neutral life stance subject, where the aim was to teach children about the world and religion and life stances without choosing sides. So that was kind of an acceptable arrangement, right? Because you could get to choose, you could choose this or you can choose that, and you had an escape from religion in schools that way.
School by school or school?
No, every school. It's centrally run, so every school had to offer this subject.
Both?
Yeah, both subjects from 1974. And this situation lingered until 1997. Because then the government decided they wanted to unite these two subjects into a unified and compulsory subject. And this subject was called Christianity, Religion and Ethics. And that was supposed to be neutral and compulsory for everyone. And Christianity was supposed to take up at least 55% of the time, and the entire subject was, as we looked upon it, of course, this subject was completely entrenched in this inside and out perspective, that we as Christians, we learn about Christianity first, and it fills up like 55% of the subject, and when we teach about the other religion and life stances, it's like us Christians looking out on the other people there who believe differently, and they believe this and they believe that, but our way of looking at things, we are Christians, So that was how the whole subject was kind of entrenched in this kind of mentality. And of course, this subject would lead to the biggest legal fight that the Norwegian Humanist Association has ever been through. The Norwegian Humanists protested heavily and claimed that the subject was not neutral at all. We supported a group of parents that sued the Norwegian state for a violation of human rights for imposing such a compulsory Christian-based subject without offering an alternative. So we sued the state, and it went through all three instances in the Norwegian legal system without winning. So the Norwegian Humanists lost all three up to the Supreme Court. And then the parents and the Norwegian Humanist Association went to the human rights, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg in France. And there we won. Yeah, so that was a big victory, of course. When we won, and that happened in 2007. So you can see that we were struggling with this case for 10 years through the Norwegian state legal system and up to the the European Court of Human Rights, and also the UN Committee of Human Rights gave us agreed with us on this subject. So then the Norwegian government had to change the subject. They reintroduced the possibility to opt out of the subject, of course, and they restructured the subject and changed its name to Religion, Life Stance and Ethics. And it was specified that proselytizing of religion was not allowed. It was strictly forbidden by the teacher. And the education had to be purely knowledge-based. And though Christianity was not longer mentioned in the name of the subject, the contents of the subject will still lean heavily on Christianity. It was also stated that about half of the subject would be about Christianity. So Christianity was still very biased also in that subject. But of course it was a step in the right direction, and it was a step in the right direction, but we are still not satisfied, of course. So it still has an acceptable bias, but it got kind of harder because it wasn't so. It's easier to fight something that is very, very bad than something that is just a little bit bad, So then, when this after we won in Strasbourg, we kind of everything settled a bit. But then we had a new government, and in 2013 we had a new conservative government that was elected in the autumn, and we've had a social democratic government for 8 years that had been in office, and they were replaced by this kind of liberal populist government that are still in power. And this present government was also backed by the Norwegian Christian Democratic Party, and that is perhaps the party in Norway that comes closest to this right-wing religious right of the US. They're not as bad, I have to be honest. They're not as bad as the religious right of the South, but you know, they're maybe the closest of the larger parties. So, and in the negotiations with the new conservative government, the Christian Democrats managed to actually get an acceptance for changing this subject once more, in their favor, of course. So the proposal now stands that the name of the subject should be changed to KRLE, and that is Christianity, Religion, Lifestance and Ethics. So they kind of added Christianity to the name of the subject. And they also are reintroducing the demand that at least 55% of the time used in the subject will be used on Christianity. So at least it shouldn't be less than 55%, it can be more, you know. So you kind of, you are really opening up for Christian indoctrination in schools once more. I used to say, if the meek shall inherit the earth, the Christian Democratic Party of Norway will not be first in line of heirs. Because they are really not meek. They are really this is our religion and we want to impose it on, that's kind of the attitude they have, in my opinion. And this bill, this proposal to change the subject has been put out on a hearing. Do you say hearing when you have a proposal and you send it out to a lot of, you say hearing? Yeah, it's been out on a hearing to different organizations, and virtually everyone says, don't do this. This is stupid. This new subject has really kind of settled. It has become a livable compromise from both parties. Not everyone are completely satisfied. The Norwegian Humanists are not satisfied, but it has become a livable compromise. We have settled the matter. So please don't start doing this again. And also a lot of Christian organizations and individuals have said that. Don't do this. It's stupid. It just creates a lot of new quarrel and noise about it, around the subject. But very recently now, we heard news that the Christian Democratic Party and the government are really standing their ground on this issue, and they will, despite that the hearing almost unanimously said, don't do this, they are going to do it anyway. And they can do it because they have the majority right now. When they have this Christian Democratic Party supporting the government parties, they have majority. So that is probably going to happen, and we are going to get a lot of new members. Because of course, it's membership-wise, it's a good thing for the Norwegian Humanist Association to have disputes like this, because a lot of people disagree strongly with the Christian Democratic Party when it comes to these matters. I'm going to, how long have I talked now?
We have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Then I will just say very briefly something about something that's quite important. And you might wonder why the Norwegian Humanist Association is so large in Norway. And it's a complex explanation for that, but one part of the explanation is funding. Because to understand lifestance policies in Norway, it's really very important to understand how the lifestance sector and the religious sector is funded. We have a very generous economical situation in Norway, it has to be admitted, and that is because since 1981 the Norwegian Humanist Association has been looked upon as equal to all the faith communities. So we have the same rights as they do. And the reasoning, the way that money is distributed to the faith sector, faith and lifestance sector in Norway is the following. Politicians grant money to the state church regardless of how many members they have. So there is a political decision how much money the state church will get. Just like you grant money to the police or to hospitals or education, you grant money to the state church regardless of the number of members. And to be able to do that without violating human rights, you have to compensate to the others, including us. So you have to compensate. And the way they do that is that they take the politically decided grant to the state church and they divide it on the number of members in the state church, and that sum is what is given to all the others multiplied by the number of members they have. So that's, and now we have a situation where the state church keeps losing members. And the politicians, they are kind of, they don't like that. So, and they don't want to cut the grants to the state church because it's such an important, cultural institution in Norway. We have to fund them, and so the grants are not lowered, and they get less members, and that means that the government are granting more and more money per member in the state church. And that's also very, of course, economically beneficial for us. So, but it's really not a good situation to have it that way. So the Norwegian Humanist Association feels that it should be changed because it hinges on a system where the state church gets treated differently from everyone else. And that's not a good thing. So, but we the NHA believes that the government should fund religious and lifestance organizations because it's an important trait in a society that you have a vibrant religious lifestance sector that people can join. But it should be done in a more equal way, we think. So one way of solving one way of solving it would be to politically grant a sum of money per member, but then the grants to the state church would depend on their number of members, and that has so far been unthinkable for Norwegian politicians to say that the grant should go down when they have less members. That is completely unacceptable in Norway, as it is now. And also, this way of compensating the others for the grants given to the state church is also actually put down now in the new Norwegian constitution. Because it says in paragraph 16 in the new constitution, it says, the Norwegian church, an evangelical Lutheran church, remains the Norwegian popular church, or the church of the people in Norway, and is as such funded by the state. Other faith and lifestance organizations should be funded in an equal manner, and that says in the constitution. So this way of compensating the others is actually written into the constitution. So it's quite a heavy thing to change, actually. And what is happening now is that you see that the expenses to the lifestance sector, the faith and lifestance sector apart from the state church, is really going right up. Because you have a situation where you have less and less members in the state church, and you have more and more members in the other, because the society diversifies, right? So you have more and more members in the other lifestance organizations, and then you have kind of the expenses goes like that. And in certain municipalities, like there is a town south of Oslo called Drammen. There they have especially a large percentage of people not members in the state church, and very few members in the state church comparatively. And they are really having a problem because they have to fund the lifestance sector from their cultural budgets, and there the money to the lifestance sector kind of eats up all the other money that was supposed to go to cultural things. like libraries and you know, arts and theaters and things like that. Okay. I think maybe I will stop there actually, because I've used up my time, haven't I? And okay, we can take questions. Yeah.
Maybe a second.
Yeah.
Could you give me, it's hard to read these things. First of all, I'd like to get an idea. How many Muslim and Jewish people are in Norway? What is the rough idea? And how are they treated?
Okay, yeah. We have quite a lot of Muslims.
Maybe you can also add how is your position toward Muslims over there?
Yeah.
Okay,
I can
could
say
everybody
something.
wait until I bring the microphone to you? Now I've got it going. Okay.
She was asking how is the situation in Norway for Muslims and Jews? Yeah, we have quite a lot of Muslims because we've had immigration from the Middle East countries, of course, especially in the central areas around Oslo. We have very, very few Jews in Norway. Very small percentage. When it comes to the Muslims, of course, we have the same problem as we have in the rest of Europe, that they are, in my opinion, they are stigmatized, because you see, especially when you look in the newspapers, they write things. When they have a story about, you know, Muslims and Islam in Norway. You know, you have a lot of hate speech in the comment sections below. So I don't like that, against Muslims, yeah. So there's kind of, and now after the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, it's become really worse. So they are really stigmatized by a lot of people, and but also, of course, we have this problem with the radical Muslims. Some young people, like in a lot of other European countries, we have young Muslim population that was actually quite well integrated into the school system, but they are going to Syria to fight for the IS, you know, and things like that. So we have a radical Muslim majority, not a majority. We have a problem with radical Islam in Norway. I don't think actually it differs a lot from other countries in Europe when it comes to that. When it comes to Jews, we've had there was an attack on the synagogue in Oslo, and we have also seen some anti-Semitic outbursts of anti-Semitism, and you know, there are complaints about pupils in schools using Jew as a negative word, you know. So, but yeah, okay. No.
Okay, let me make an announcement.
Okay.
I'm going to walk the mic around.
Okay.
I am watching who it is. If someone talks from the audience to you, please repeat the question, because it doesn't get recorded otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Dana St. George, raised in a small Swedish village in Minnesota.
Okay.
And we had one church, the Lutheran Church. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about Catholicism in Norway, because when I was in high school, I read Kristin Lavransdatter, which was a novel about Norway, and she had a very difficult life in the feudal times, and I believe she was a Catholic. So I was wondering if there were parts of Norway, like in Germany and other countries, that are more Catholic instead of Lutheran.
No, not a lot. The Catholic Church is growing quite rapidly in Norway right now, but that is mainly because of immigration from Poland and other Catholic countries, but mainly Poland. So they are really growing, but I don't think that there are not a lot of, there have been quite a lot of Catholics. And we've had a change. It has been kind of fashionable, you know, kind of wealthy people on the west parts of Oslo have been accused of being kind of a fashion there to convert to Catholicism. because people like to, you know, the services there have more things happen in their services. So people on the west, you know, affluent parts of Oslo, they have converted. But I don't think that actually amounts to a large number. But they are really growing. But that is also because they have had kind of an aggressive way of recruiting new members into the Catholic Church. But it's because of immigration from Poland mainly, and also from the Philippines, and yeah. Okay.
You mentioned the European Court of Human Rights, and that's an institution of the European Union. And I believe that Norway is not a member right now of the European Union. Is that right? I mean,
I'm not quite sure. I don't think it's a part of the European Union. Actually, it's a more of a international cooperation to be able to condemn people who have who have violated the human rights. But you are right that Norway is not a member of the European Union.
Yeah.
But the European Court of Human Rights is not.
But that is
correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that is connected. And anyway, Norway is really though we are not formally a member of the European Union, we are really very heavily cooperating with the European Union in many ways. For instance, this Schengen cooperation, where you can travel freely between countries. Norway is a member of that. And Norway is also a member of the common market. So you can travel from a EU country to Norway to work if you're a citizen of an EU country. So we are virtually a member of the EU, even though we're not formally members. Yeah.
Well, I guess my understanding is that Norway would not be bound by a decision of the European Court of Human Rights, but that's I think what the issue is. So no. That's odd.
When you have ratified the Human Rights Declaration, you need to comply with. Yeah. Well, I mean, you could choose not to, but that would be very, very bad and be looked very badly upon by other countries in the world.
Well, maybe there's some sort of treaty that Norway has with.
We are definitely members of that international cooperation that the Strasbourg Court is part of.
Okay, please be patient. There are several people ahead of the people raising their hand now.
Thank you so much for your speech. You know, I am coming. Oops, that's good. I lived in Scandinavia, and I immigrate from Iran. I experienced Islam, and I was waiting for the stuff that is happening right now much earlier, as a matter of fact, because I experienced 35 years ago Islam, the real Islam, and. I realize that you are talking about the Christianity, and I know that in Scandinavia, Christianity is very weak because it has gone through a lot of reform, and people really doesn't care, don't go to the churches. And also Judaism also have gone through the reform. But Islam hasn't gone through the reform, and the real Islam is the Taliban Islam, as I believe. And I think that Islam needs to go through the reform. I am wondering what you are doing for that, because your focus only is on Christianity, and you forget the big part, Islam, that needs to go through the reform. And also immigration, because the segregation in Scandinavia contribute to the radicalism of young people.
Yeah, well, the Norwegian Humanist Association strongly wants people to criticize the Islam, the Islamic faith, and also the consequences of fundamentalist Islamic dogma, of course. So that is really something that we want to contribute to. But on the other hand, you know, Islam in Norway, it's a very small, it's a minority in the population, and we are It's kind of difficult to answer very shortly because it's a minority in the population, and if I should speak, my personal opinion, you have to be careful to act in a way that you stigmatize a minority, because if you are acting in a way that a minority feels ostracized from community, which I think a lot of people who criticize Islam very, very fervently, they are criticizing it in a way that they are ostracizing the entire Islamic community in Norway. And I think that is dangerous, because then you would get much more hostility, and people would go into the trenches and stop speaking to each other. So that is a very difficult. But at the same time, you need to criticize radical Islam. You need to criticize. This dogmatic thinking. So it's kind of you have to level these things out. And it's not a very easy question we have, but my personal view on this is that you should try to isolate the people in Islam that are fundamentalist and are dogmatic, and then you should try to ally yourself with the more liberal or more moderate. You don't agree? Yeah, okay. But anyway, my personal opinion is that it's dangerous when you start ostracizing or stigmatizing a minority, and you kind of chase them into a trench, something like that. Yeah. But other people in the Norwegian Humanist Association will have different views on this, and the Norwegian Humanist Association as such doesn't have a kind of joint view on how to handle these kind of problems. No.
Yeah, Jerry Grass. I recently read a book called Living in Denial, and by a professor at Oregon State University, or University of Oregon. Her name is Carrie Norgard. She's of Norwegian ancestry, and the book Living in Denial is about her experience in a small village town in Norway, where she was asking people about climate change, and it was very interesting because it seemed like everybody understood that climate change was real and a problem, and part of the reason they understood it is because they had skiing in their town. And on the other hand, they were also so if one-on-one conversations they talk about it, but in a group setting they wouldn't talk about it. Are you following what I'm saying?
You're thinking about climate change denial?
Yeah. Well, see, what she perceived was that basically, at one level, they knew that as individuals thinking for themselves, they knew that climate change was real, but as a group, they didn't know how other people felt, so they didn't want to talk about it, so they resisted talking about it. And I was wondering, was that true in the rest of Norway, or is this town unique? Probably not.
I haven't read that book, and I don't actually recognize the way of thinking actually now. In my opinion, climate change deniers have been kind of marginalized the recent years, because there were more of a real debate about these issues a couple of years ago, in my opinion. Because you had some people vocalize, they said their opinions against climate change, and you had more of an equal debate. But now, the recent years, they've been more and more. They've become a minority, they've been marginalized, and they have been more and more, the climate change deniers have become more and more aggressive and kind of ostracized from mainstream scientific community. That's my impression of it, at least, in Norway.
Yeah, this book is a couple of years old.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Chip. The funding to the classic Lutheran Norwegian State Church, there's another group you mentioned, funding for cultural and things. Does the NHA get funded from the state?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, yeah.
So my question is, what percentage is culled from the members and what comes from the state, and what percentage is that compared to the Lutheran State Church?
The percentage of government money coming into the NHA is maybe it is like 2/3 from the state and 1/3 from the membership fees. I'm not completely sure how it spells out, but we get more money from the state than we get in membership fees. Yeah. What's the other part of the question?
Ratio of NHH state money versus Lutheran state money. The ratio.
No, the principle is that when the state church gets more money, we also get more money. So that's supposed to be, because the principle is that whatever the politicians grant to the state church, the other ones should also have the same per member.
How do they pick who gets what?
How they pick who get what? Yeah, it's just a basic formula. You know, the politicians say that, for instance, the state church gets to make it easy, like 1 million kroners, and then you see, okay, they get 1 million, and they have so and so many members, and you take 1 million, divide it by the number of members, and you get a sum per. You understand? Yeah, and then you get a sum per head, and that is combined in the public sector now. It's nearly 1,000 kroners per head, and then you, from the state and from the municipalities all over the country. And then that sum combined will be around nearly 1,000 kroners, and then we get 1,000 kroners multiplied by the number of members we have. Yeah, that's how it's been done. Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, and I'm reading, if I can barely read it here, but Norway's youth fossil oil fund is going on a divestment. And Norway is an oil-producing country, if I remember.
Yeah.
And so I would say that your population of 5 million, I would say most of them are quite aware of climate change. And your government is actually acting on it, but against a lot of very powerful interests.
Yeah.
So I congratulate the country, and I hope that it will start spreading around the world.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that climate change denial is much stronger in the US than it is in Norway. We have it, of course. And another thing is creationism, you know, evolution. We have that. We have creationism in Norway too, but it's very marginal, and the people who are saying those things are very radicalized, and they are kind of the lunatic fringe.
Okay, we're probably about 2 more minutes, so there won't be very many more questions unless the questions are short and the answers are short.
Hi, dear. Thank you for coming. Okay. I'm having a huge, I don't want to say war, but discussion with the government right now, because I was teaching my children universal thinking as opposed to critical thinking, because you were talking about being ostracized. And I really feel like in this country, people were supposed to use their phones to promote more management and success, but they're really using it as an ostracizing machine to constantly criticize people. But that's what they teach in public school, critical thinking. We need more universal thinking, which is where you don't just say, I don't like that, throw it away. You think, okay, well, I didn't like that, but maybe it can go somewhere else, be a little nicer, and then put something that you want. You know, have more humanity about your decision making, instead of just throwing things out in the street, or, you know, like people, places, things, objects. If you go to San Francisco, everything's in the street now, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that it's very important to think universally and think things in connection. When it comes to critical thinking, that is something. You know, I have kids in school in Berkeley High School now, and a middle school in Berkeley, and I think that they are much better at telling the kids how important it is with critical thinking. In Norway, we are not, in my opinion, that good to tell kids how important it is to have rationality and scientific thinking, scientific critical thinking is very important, because that is also that is very universalist way of thinking, because you have to take a lot of things into consideration, of course, and not only focus on one thing. That you see, for instance, is vaccine deniers are doing right now. You know, they're not thinking universally, in my opinion.
Okay, this is going to be the last question.
Yeah, hopefully this will be an easy one. I was curious about if the king is, if the king is required to be a member of the church, and the next in line decides he doesn't want to be a member of the church, does that mean he's simply not, you know, he'll be passed over in succession, or is that a crisis?
I guess he would have just then had to abdicate. Yeah, but it's an interesting story about that. I didn't mention that. I had it in my script, but you know, when the politicians were discussing this constitutional, you know, how the new constitution should be, one of the proposals were to remove this obligation for the king to be a member of the state church, and then the king actually intervened. And he called one of the ministers into the royal castle, and he told them that I want this to be in the constitution. This is my prerogative, because I'm the royal. You know, of course, I don't know how he put it, but you know, the upshot of it was that he wanted that to be in the constitution, and the politicians agreed, and they kind of yielded. And agreed that it should be in the constitution. So that is, for me, that is an example of pure, not that democracy kind of just fell apart, because it's a very, very important part of Norwegian democracy is that the king should never interfere with political matters. But there he did it, and kind of people kind of thought, okay, but it's about him, it concerns him as a person, so he should be allowed to do it just in this case, people said. But I mean, that is bullshit in my opinion, because it is about the function of being king. It's not by him. Nobody denies him to be a Christian. It's about the office, you know. So that was big argument against monarchy, in my opinion.
Okay, so why don't we give a hand to our speaker and remember, okay.
Thank you.